Welcome to Betrayal or Not. I'm Ryan Cooper, and no, I haven't seen today's story yet. That's Stephanie's job. She's going to walk us through it, while I pop in at key moments to figure this out with you. Was it betrayal or not? My reactions are real-time, just like yours. No spoilers here. And today's story? It starts with a small detail, but a suspicious one. A woman named Melissa finds an earring in her husband's car, and it's not hers. Just a misunderstanding? Or the first clue in a hidden affair? Let's find out together. Steph, take it away.
The mystery of the lost earrings. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windshield like liquid gold, scattering light across the dashboard. Austin, Texas, seemed to exhale heat and routine through its wide, tree-lined streets. The sky, clear and tinged with orange, was slowly fading as the day slid into night. In the passenger seat, Melissa Carver tucked her dark brown hair behind her ear, her brown eyes gazing out at the bustling cafes and the neat row of bicycles in front of sleek buildings. At 39, she had a calm, composed presence, the kind of woman who thinks before she reacts, but feels everything deeply. Behind the wheel, Brent Carver kept his hands steady, his jaw slightly tight. At 40, a successful attorney, he was methodical, disciplined, and well-respected in the local legal community. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his green eyes were cold, like tempered glass. Sometimes charming, almost always unreadable. Silence between them wasn't unusual, but this one was heavy. Some days felt more filled with subtext than actual words. They had been married for nearly 20 years. "Thanks for the ride," Melissa said, trying to sound light. Landon needed the car today. He had his oral presentation on comparative law. "Right," Brent replied, eyes still on the road. "Makes sense." More silence. Melissa adjusted her bag on her lap. The drive to the publishing house where she worked wasn't long, but the discomfort made it feel stretched. Lately, Brent had been more distant, coming home late, sleeping poorly, always in a hurry. And the way he avoided her gaze, that was new. Then she noticed something metallic under the car mat near her foot. She leaned down slowly and picked up the small object with her fingers. When she saw it, her stomach gave a subtle twist. Earrings, tiny, silver, with a translucent stone in the center. Delicate, and definitely not hers. She held them up, her voice carefully composed. "Brent, Do you know whose earrings these are?" He glanced quickly, saw the item in her hand, and turned back to the road, a little too fast. "Oh, no, must be someone from the office. Maybe I gave a ride to an intern the other day. I don't really remember." Melissa said nothing for a moment. She felt the weight of the earrings in her hand, too small to do any damage, but big enough to trigger an alarm. "An intern?" Brent let out a short, impatient sigh. "Yeah, one of the girls from the firm's event last week. It was raining, I offered a ride. It was quick. I guess she dropped them without realizing." "I see." Melissa looked out the window. They were nearing the neighborhood where her publishing house was located. The air in the car turned even colder despite the heat outside. "You really don't recognize them?" "Melissa," he said almost sharp, "they're just earrings. You're trying to turn this into something it's not." She didn't answer. The car stopped in front of the red brick building of her publishing company. Brent shifted to neutral. Melissa opened the door slowly, still holding the earrings. "I'll talk to you later," she said flatly. "Of course," he replied. She stepped out and gently shut the door. The car drove off and disappeared into traffic. Melissa stood there for a few moments, eyes fixed on the hot asphalt. Sweat trickled down her back. Her breath quickened, not from the heat, but from the suspicion that had just been born, small and shining, like the earrings she found under the car mat. She slipped them into her coat pocket, took a deep breath, and walked into the building. She still didn't know whose they were, but she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just forgetfulness. It was the beginning of something she would have to uncover, piece by piece. Night had fallen over Austin, bringing with it a sticky warmth that clung to the skin even after the sun had disappeared. Outside, the streetlights cast golden patches along the sidewalks, and cicadas sang from their hiding spots in the tall trees. Melissa rested her head against the car window, watching the city pass by in fragments. Landon, at the wheel, was silent. The radio played soft indie tracks in the background, but neither of them seemed to be listening. "Thanks for picking me up," Melissa said eventually. "Of course," her son replied, eyes still on the road. "I was already on campus. Figured it made sense." She glanced sideways at him. Landon Carver, 19 years old, law student. Short dark hair, athletic build, green eyes just like his father's. Handsome, smart, usually calm. But tonight, something was off. There was a tension in how he gripped the wheel. In the way, the silences lingered just a bit too long. "How was your day?" she asked. "Long. 2 seminars and a final group project meeting. Oh, and Professor Delgado grilled me during criminal law. That was fun." "You seem tired." "I am." Pause. "But it's not just that." She raised her eyebrows. "What is it?" Landon hesitated. His fingers drummed lightly on the steering wheel. Then he let out a small sigh. "It's nothing major. Just sometimes I feel like I have to live up to Dad, you know? Like any mistake is instantly a disappointment." Melissa was quiet for a few seconds. It hurt to hear, not because it was news, but because it confirmed what she'd always sensed. Landon carried Brent's presence like a weight, not just as a father, but as a standard. "You don't have to prove anything to him, Landon. Or, to me, you just need to be yourself." He gave a faint smile, but didn't answer. When they pulled up in front of the house, the car's air conditioning felt even colder than the air outside. Melissa stepped out with tense shoulders, thanked him, again, and headed inside at a slow pace. Landon followed right after. "I'm heading upstairs. I've got more school stuff to finish," he said, already on the stairs, not even taking off his shoes. Melissa nodded without saying a word. The sound of his footsteps upstairs faded quickly. Then, silence. She stood still in the middle of the living room. The house was spotless, as always. Clean. With that subtle citrus scent from the diffuser, she changed weakly. The furniture in place, the pillows arranged, the lighting soft and curated, but something felt out of place. Not in the room, inside her. Melissa walked into the kitchen, turned on the electric kettle for tea, and leaned her hands on the counter. The image of the earrings flashed in her mind. Tiny, discreet, but impossible to ignore. Brent's words from earlier echoed through her head. Probably some interns. A vague line, no name, no certainty, no truth. She closed her eyes for a moment. It felt like being back at the publishing house, reading a manuscript full of contradictions, poorly built sentences, inconsistent dialogue, characters acting out of tone. And worst of all, she was one of those characters, inside the story, not knowing how it would end. The kettle whistled. Melissa turned it off but didn't pour the tea. She couldn't stomach anything. She walked into the hallway, pulled the earrings from her purse pocket and placed them on the console table, stared at them for a long time. Not because they were beautiful, but because of what they represented. A crack, a flaw in the narrative of her life. Upstairs, she heard the muffled sound of a door closing. Probably Landon in his room. Brent wasn't home yet. Said he'd be working late, going over contracts at the office. Of course, there was always something to go over. Melissa took a deep breath. In that house, clean, quiet, orderly, she had never felt more alone. Surrounded by familiar walls, and yet feeling a new kind of emptiness. The kind that creeps in when you're no longer sure who you can trust. She climbed the stairs slowly to the bedroom. Her phone blinked with some random notification on the nightstand. She ignored it. She lay down on the bed without changing, staring at the ceiling, eyes wide open in the dark. The next morning rose heavy over Austin. Melissa woke up before her alarm, her eyes tired and her mind still racing. Brent had already left, said he had an early meeting at the office. He left a note on the bathroom mirror. Morning, early meeting. See you later. B. Dry, straightforward, distant. Melissa stared at the paper for a few seconds before crumpling it and tossing it into the trash. At work, the day dragged. As editor-in-chief of a small but respected publishing house, she usually dove into manuscripts with focus and enjoyment. But today, the computer screen looked foggy. The pages didn't flow. Paragraphs felt like static noise. She tried to read a promising legal thriller by a new Texan author, but every word pulled her back to the night before. Brent had come home late, blazer over his arm, looking perfectly rehearsed in his exhaustion. Said a few bland sentences, barely touched his salad at dinner, then went upstairs. And this morning, he left even earlier than usual. No kiss, no glance. The excuse of an early meeting felt a little too convenient. Melissa closed her laptop with a sigh. She couldn't focus. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe it really was just stress. But what if it wasn't? At 3:43 p.m., she grabbed her purse and told her assistant she'd be leaving early. Said it was for a personal matter. It was true. She needed answers, or at least something more concrete. Brent's law firm was downtown, a sleek building made of glass and steel, with silent carpets and abstract art on the walls. Melissa entered the lobby and went straight to the firm's floor. The receptionist, who usually greeted her with a bright smile, wasn't at her desk. Odd, but convenient. She walked the hallway, knowing it well. She'd been here before. Many times. The corporate silence felt even thicker than usual. As she neared Brent's office, she noticed the door was slightly open. And then she stopped. Inside, she saw him from behind, leaning over his desk, laughing with someone. The woman's voice was young, clear, a little too soft. Melissa took a slow, quiet step forward. Just enough to see. Brent was smiling, a smile she hadn't seen in weeks. The young woman sitting across from him wore a sleek ponytail. Fair skin, pink lips, confident posture, way too comfortable. In that space. You should sue that coffee shop, she said through laughter. Serving burnt lattes like that should be a federal crime. Brent chuckled, genuinely. Too genuinely. You should be a lawyer, Brianna. You argue way too well. Brianna. The name landed like a muted thunderclap. Melissa pushed the door open slowly. Brent noticed first. He straightened immediately. Too late. Melissa, he said, his voice slightly too high. What a surprise. You didn't say you were coming. I decided to stop by, she replied, calm, almost cold. I was nearby and thought I'd surprise you. Brent cleared his throat and looked away. The girl stood up and discreetly adjusted her blouse. This is Brianna Pierce, he rushed. She's an intern here at the firm. Melissa looked at her for a long second. 22, tops. Pretty. She smiled politely, awkwardly, and then, like a needle in her memory, it came back. Probably some interns. That's what Brent had said about the earrings, with that same vague tone, like it meant nothing. Pleasure. To meet you, Mrs. Carver, Brianna said, not sure what to do with her hands. Melissa nodded briefly. I was just heading out, Brianna added quickly. She grabbed a clipboard and slipped between them with a timid wave. The door closed behind her. Silence filled the space. Brent stepped closer, tried to smile. It was just a conversation, Melissa. She's new. We were just chatting. Office stuff. You seemed very comfortable. Her voice was nearly a whisper. Melissa. She raised a hand. No, let's not turn this into a performance. I came here unannounced, and I saw enough. You're seeing something that isn't there. I would never do anything to hurt you." She looked at him for a moment, wanted to believe it, but her heart no longer allowed her to. "I'll see you at home, Brent." She turned and walked out. The sound of her heels echoing through the hallway was the only noise on the floor, and with every step, one thing became clearer. The doubt was no longer just a seed. It had taken root.
So let me get this straight. Melissa finds a random earring in the car, and her husband is the one who casually mentions it might belong to an intern? Oh, Brent. That wasn't just a suggestion. That was a test balloon. And now, surprise. The intern has a name, Brianna, young, pretty, way too cozy in that office. And Melissa, she's picking up the scent. Now let's be honest. A lost earring, an intern conveniently involved, a husband who changes the subject too quickly. This is starting to smell like something, but hey, so far it's all just clues, hints, suspicious vibes. And you know what they say, suspicion isn't proof. Not yet.
Night fell over Austin like a thick velvet curtain. One by one, the neighborhood lights came on as the sky faded into a deep, almost purple blue. Inside the Carver house, silence wrapped around the rooms with an uncomfortable kind of elegance. Melissa sat on the edge of the bed, still fully dressed, staring at the floor without really seeing it. Since coming back from Brent's office, not a single word had been exchanged between them. She hadn't mentioned the intern's name. There was no need. He knew what she saw. And that was enough. From downstairs, only the occasional sound of the TV could be heard. Brent was in the living room, supposedly watching a documentary, or pretending to. It was always like this when he wanted to avoid talking. He buried himself in something that required just enough focus to stay distant. Melissa changed slowly, washed her face, tied up her hair. When she finally came down to fix something for dinner, she found Brent already in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. Sleeves rolled up, face composed. "I was going to start a stir-fry," he said, not looking at her. "Thought we could cook together." "Go ahead. I'm not really in the mood," she replied, opening the fridge. "Just grabbing a drink." The atmosphere was heavy. The sounds were minimal. The knife against the cutting board, the low flame of the stove, the soft click of a can opener. "Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes, he said, trying to sound casual. "Okay." Minutes later, they sat at the table, each with their own plate. They ate in silence for a long time, until Brent tried again. "You were upset, weren't you?" Melissa slowly set down her fork and looked at him. "I was surprised." Brent nodded. He avoided her eyes at first, then looked up more firmly. "It wasn't what it looked like." "Then tell me what it was." He hesitated, ran a hand down his face. "It was just a light conversation. She's new, nervous. I was trying to break the ice, that's all. Honestly." Melissa took a deep breath. "The problem isn't the conversation. It's the laugh, the ease. You haven't had that with me in I don't even know how long." Brent dropped his gaze. For a moment, he didn't say anything. "I've been working a lot," he mumbled, "and I know that's pulled us apart. But there's no other woman. You have to believe that." She studied him carefully. Wanted to know if those words were coming from his chest or just from his throat. "Maybe," she replied. "But I haven't decided what I believe yet." After that, they said nothing else. They finished dinner in silence. Melissa washed the dishes slowly, as if scrubbing down each thought. She didn't load the dishwasher. Brent didn't ask why. He simply packed the leftovers and put them in the fridge. Later that night, already in their room, Melissa heard Landon's bedroom door close upstairs. He'd been out all day, supposedly studying at a friend's house. At least, that's what he said. When he came home, he barely spoke to his parents, looked tired. But something about his behavior seemed rehearsed, measured. She walked upstairs and lightly tapped on his half-closed door. "Hey, sweetie." "Hey, Mom," he answered without turning, seated at his desk with his laptop open. "How was your day?" she asked warmly. Busy. I've got a paper due tomorrow. Criminal case law, total nightmare. She smiled gently. If you need help reviewing, let me know. Thanks, but better not. The professor's super picky about tone. Melissa chuckled, but her gaze lingered just a little longer than usual. Landon didn't seem comfortable. He was restless. The way he ran his hand through his hair, the nervous clicking on the keyboard. She knew him too well not to notice. Good night, then. Good night, Mom. She gently closed the door. Back in the bedroom, Melissa lay down on the bed without saying another word. Brent already had his eyes closed, breathing heavily. But she knew. He wasn't asleep. He was just avoiding another conversation. And there, in the warm darkness of the room, Melissa understood something. Sometimes silence isn't absence. It's too much presence. And the silence that now connected them said far more than any phrase could. The next morning, the Carver house was slowly waking up under the heavy skies of a Texan spring. The shy morning sun barely made it through the large kitchen windows, where everything moved with habitual precision. The Italian coffee maker released rhythmic steam, the toast browned in the oven, and freshly sliced fruit rested in porcelain bowls. Claire, the longtime housekeeper who handled morning tasks, was quietly setting the table. She placed the cups in the right spots, the freshly squeezed juice, and the folded newspaper beside Brent's plate, as always. Melissa walked in wearing a silk robe and a loose bun. She sat down without saying a word, observing the house's small motions, everything working as if there were no cracks beneath the surface. Brent was already at the table, reading emails on his phone while spreading butter on his toast. "Good morning," he said, without looking up. "Good morning." Claire poured the coffee without breaking the silence. Melissa thanked her with a small nod, and shortly after, Landon entered, freshly showered, neatly dressed in a light shirt, dark pants, and just a hint of cologne. "Did you sleep well?" Melissa asked, grabbing a slice of whole wheat bread. "Yeah, a little too well. I barely made it out of bed in time." Brent glanced up from his phone, eyeing his son for a few seconds. "Any special reason you're looking so sharp?" Melissa asked, curious. "Presentation today at school. Criminal law. The professor said it could count toward a summer internship." Melissa nodded, but she noticed the cologne, the neatly styled hair, the new watch. There was something more behind that effort. "By the way," Landon said, already cutting into his toast, "can I take your car tonight, Dad?" Brent raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Mine?" "Yeah, I've got dinner plans with some friends. Might swing by someone's place afterward. Anyway, can I take it?" "And your car?" Brent asked, in a neutral tone. "That brake noise came back. I'd rather not risk it today." Melissa sipped her coffee, watching her son with interest. "Funny you'd want your dad's car specifically," she said lightly. "Any particular social reason?" Landon smiled without looking directly at his parents. "It's just more comfortable to drive. And cleaner, to be honest." Brent let out a short laugh. "Sure, just don't get home too late, and let me know if anything comes up." "Will do." Landon finished up quickly and left. Claire collected the plates quietly. Melissa stayed seated, stirring her coffee slowly. After a moment, she looked at her husband. "He's hiding something," she said, with a barely there smile. "And you know how much I hate not knowing things." Brent looked up, catching the meaning between the lines. She wasn't just talking about their son, and he knew it. Melissa woke up before her alarm. The sky wasn't fully bright yet, but the warm spring air of Texas was already resting over the rooftops. She dressed slowly, went downstairs quietly, and found the kitchen filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and warm bread. Claire was already at work, preparing everything with her usual quiet efficiency. Melissa sat at the table and sighed. The night before, she had waited up for Landon until nearly midnight, but exhaustion had won. She wasn't the mother of a little boy anymore. She was the mother of a man. And sometimes that came at a cost. She heard footsteps in the hallway, and soon Landon appeared. Damp hair, cotton shirt, his expression calmer than it had been in recent days. He sat at the table as if nothing unusual had happened. "Did you sleep well?" she asked casually. "Yeah. Long night." Melissa stirred her coffee slowly, watching him over the rim of her cup. Was Chloe part of the group? Landon hesitated, just a second before answering, enough for her to notice she'd hit the mark. "Yeah, we've been talking a lot." "That's nice. She seems sweet," Melissa said, helping herself to fruit, as if she didn't want to dig deeper. But her mind had already returned to the earrings in Brent's car. What if they belonged to Chloe? Young, distracted, sitting in the passenger seat. Maybe they had fallen during a glance or a more intimate moment. The thought didn't exactly comfort her, but it opened up a whole new set of possibilities. "Was she wearing earrings last night?" she asked, still looking down at her plate. Landon frowned. "Who?" "Chloe." He thought for a moment. "I think so." "Why?" "No reason. Just curious," Melissa replied, offering a soft smile. But inside, the puzzle was rearranging itself again. She finished her coffee in silence, listening to the world waking up around her. Over the course of the following week, Melissa did her best to silence the voices in her head. She threw herself into work like someone clinging to a life raft. Meetings, editing, deadlines, final approvals, everything was running smoothly at the publishing house. Her team had met the semester's release targets, and that was enough to keep up appearances. Brent, meanwhile, carried on with surgical precision. Out early, home late, polite, helpful, but keeping a distance that had become routine. Melissa tried not to read into every silence, every vague glance, tried and failed. Landon, busy with exams and late study sessions, seemed unaware of everything. Or maybe he was just better at pretending. The dinner with her editorial team had been planned to celebrate hitting quarterly goals. Nothing formal, just a relaxed evening, wine, laughter, shared desserts. Melissa wasn't exactly excited about it. The week had been long, tense, but she went out of courtesy, dressed simply, with understated elegance. Brent, as usual, wouldn't attend. When she mentioned the dinner earlier that afternoon, he had only said, "Client meeting tonight. No idea when I'll be back. Congrats on the numbers. No, have fun, no details." Just enough to shut the conversation down. When dinner ended a little after 10, Melissa said her goodbyes with polite warmth. She was tired. Got in the car, planning to drive straight home. But along the way, she took an alternate route to avoid downtown traffic, the kind that passed through South Congress, Austin's bohemian neighborhood lined with restaurants and charming storefront bars. Traffic was slow, the car crawling, and that's when she saw him. Brent, sitting at an outdoor table under warm amber lights strung on black wires, smiling at someone across from him. He was leaning in, posture relaxed, too relaxed. The smile, the gaze, the way he held his glass. Everything about him was too familiar. Of course it was. It was Brent, her husband, sitting across from him. Brianna Pierce, the intern. 22. Years old. Youthful face, hair pulled back in a high ponytail. She laughed at something Brent had just said, her eyes sparkling. And for a second her hand touched his. Casually, confidently. Melissa felt her stomach drop. She pulled the car over with an automatic motion. The city sounds became muffled. The closed windows didn't stop the pain from coming in. She watched. For a few moments, long, cruel ones. No one saw her. She could have driven away. She could have gotten out and made a scene. But she did none of that. She started the engine again and drove home. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just drove, eyes fixed on the road, feeling each heartbeat like a drum echoing inside her chest. At home, she took off her shoes near the door, hung her bag, poured herself a glass of water, and sat quietly on the couch. She finished the glass, slowly, listening to the nighttime silence and the noise inside her mind.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Brent didn't have time to go to the dinner with his wife, but had time to enjoy a drink at a cozy bar with the intern, and not just any intern, a young, smiling, confident one. Too close, too relaxed. Too much eye contact. Melissa saw it, and so did you. If before it was just a gut feeling, now there's a picture, and a clear one. Look, if Melissa's suspicious, she's got reason. Now the question is she going to confront him, pretend she didn't see it, or is she waiting to catch him in the act? I don't know about you, but I'm dying to find out. Steph, take it from here. Things are heating up.
Melissa heard the door open and softly click shut behind Brent. It was almost midnight. She was sitting on the living room couch, the lights low, a glass of wine in her hand, untouched. The TV was on, set to the Weather Channel, volume barely audible. She wasn't blinking. Brent dropped his keys into the ceramic tray on the console. When he saw his wife sitting there, completely still, he froze. "You're still up," he said, surprised. "Oh, you noticed." She didn't take her eyes off the screen. "I was just wondering what time you'd be leaving South Congress." The Sai name landed like a stone. Brent hesitated. He didn't even try to lie. "I can explain." Melissa turned toward him slowly, her expression calm, almost elegant. "Go ahead. Explain what exactly you were doing, drinking wine with an intern at a casual little bar, miles away from your so-called client meeting." He ran a hand through his hair, blazer still on, like a man caught mid-transition. "It was just a drink. After work. I needed to breathe. So did Brianna. We'd been buried in the Hallister case all day. It was exhausting. I didn't want to bother you with it." "How thoughtful," Melissa said, crossing her legs slowly. "But toasting with a 22-year-old intern. What an interesting way to de-stress." Brent stepped closer, irritation surfacing more than defensiveness. "Melissa, you know me. I would never, ever cheat on you. You know that. Nothing happened. We were just talking. That's all." She stared at him for a long moment. There was no yelling, only control, a cold anger burning from the inside. And the hand touch, the laughter, the way she leaned in like she knew every crease in your shirt. Brent took a deep breath. "You're exaggerating. You're reading too much into it. I never touched her, not like that. Never." He sat on the arm of the chair across from her. "Melissa, I'm your husband. I love you. That's real." She picked up the remote and turned off the TV. "The problem, Brent, is that you always sound so convincing, and that's what scares me most." He fell silent. "Are you sleeping in our room tonight?" she asked, still holding the untouched glass of wine. Brent hesitated. "If you don't mind." Melissa looked at him for a beat, expressionless. "There's a lot I care about, Brent. But tonight, do whatever you want." She turned and walked up the stairs in silence, leaving behind only the sound of her steps and the echo of everything left unsaid. Brent stood still, eyes fixed on the empty staircase, as if waiting for an answer that would never come. The night was restless. Melissa slept very little. She turned from one side to the other, mind racing, body worn out. Eventually, she dozed off. But by 6 sharps, she was already up. Put on a cotton shirt and headed down to make coffee. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and warm bread. The silence in the house was heavy, but clean. The silence of people who no longer feel the need to pretend. As she stirred the milk into her mug, she heard footsteps upstairs. They were light. Then the muffled sound of a door opening and another closing. Landon. He'd gotten home late the night before, probably after she'd fallen asleep, and then she heard his voice, low but clear enough to carry through the hallway. Melissa froze, her hand still gripping the spoon. "No, she can't find out right now." Pause. "Yeah, it was last night. Did she see anything?" I'm not sure if she connected the dots, but we need to be more careful. Another pause. A nervous chuckle. Yeah, I know. But this time, extra caution, Brianna. Got it? Melissa stood still, fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. Her temples throbbed with pressure. Brianna. She took a deep breath. Quiet. Controlled. When Landon entered the kitchen, minutes later, she was already seated at the table with the newspaper open, acting like nothing had happened. He smiled, poured himself coffee, grabbed some toast. Morning, Mom. Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well? He asked, a little curious. Yes, Melissa replied simply, flipping the page. She pretended she hadn't heard anything. Pretended to be the same as always. But inside, another crack was forming. Now it wasn't just her husband. Now it seemed her son was hiding something too. And for the first time, Melissa started to fear she was surrounded by secrets in her own home.
Well, he denied it. Said he loves her, that he's loyal, and sure, it sounds sincere. But good luck convincing Melissa of that, right? Because when there's a lost earring, a pretty intern way too close for comfort, and now the son somehow involved, it's getting a little too hard to swallow. And wait a minute. Wasn't Landon dating Chloe? Melissa even thought the earring might be hers. So what does he have to do with Brianna? Is the kid juggling two girls? Or is this connected to his dad? Does he know something? Is he covering it up? Man, Melissa can't catch a break. Steph, take it from here. Because now I really need answers.
Melissa woke up before her alarm again. She spent a few minutes staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the silence around her. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that settles in when too much has been left unsaid. She was upset. At Brent, at Landon, at herself. Brent, for everything he hadn't explained properly. Landon, because he seemed to be involved in something she didn't understand. And now, somehow, Brianna Pierce, Brent's intern, was involved. Too, wasn't he seeing Chloe? She thought, still lying there. It was too much confusion. And what the hell was Brianna doing on the phone with her son, in secret? Melissa shook her head, as if she could physically push the doubts away. But at that moment, all she could do was get up, take a quick shower, and go downstairs to make breakfast. Landon was already in the kitchen, eating cereal straight from the bowl. He barely looked up when she walked in. "Did you sleep well?" she asked. He mumbled, distracted by his phone. She sat down, picked up a slice of bread, and observed him for a moment. So much like his father. And yet, so distant. Maybe I'm overreacting, she thought. Maybe it was just her own insecurity. Maybe she was just tired. At the publishing house, deadlines were piling up. 2 authors were demanding rewrites. A printing delay had messed up the schedule. Truth was, she'd barely seen her husband these past few days. And her son? Only during breakfast. Sometimes, she came home later than Brent, but it was on a Wednesday morning that something different happened. Brent, already dressed in his perfect light blue shirt and dark tie, showed up in the kitchen earlier than usual. He sat down, grabbed a cup of coffee, and watched her quietly for a few moments. "You've been working a lot," he said. "Yeah, it's a busy season," she replied, not making much eye contact. "And this new assistant, Matt, right? Is he helping or making things worse?" Melissa smirked slightly. There was something in his tone. Almost. Discomfort. "He's actually great. Efficient, low maintenance, and he makes me laugh." Brent said nothing, just nodded, but his eyes gave him away. "Are you jealous of Matt?" she asked, laughing. "Of course not," he said flatly. "I'm just asking. Funny. When you grab drinks with your intern, I'm overreacting. But when my assistant messages me at 7 a.m. about a meeting, that's a problem?" He sighed and leaned back in the chair. "Melissa, I don't want to fight. You're right. I just think we're both working too much. We need a break. We need to prioritize. Us again. She looked at him, surprised. It had been a long time since she'd heard him say us. It had been even longer since it sounded sincere. "I'll think about it," she said calmly, though she felt a small pinch in her chest. 2 days later, on a Friday, he invited her to dinner. Just said it was a surprise, told her to get dressed up a little. Melissa hesitated. She still didn't fully trust him, but something in his voice, or maybe inside herself, told her to go. She wore a dark blue satin dress, low heels, simple earrings. Left her hair down. She looked beautiful, but not theatrical. That wasn't the point. Brent picked her up right on time. He looked sharp, smelled great, and smiled more than he had in weeks. "Can I know where we're going?" "Not tonight." "It's a surprise," he said, smiling. "Not even a hint?" she teased. "Just trust me." When the car stopped in front of a banquet hall, her eyes widened. He took her hand and led her inside. And as they walked in, the lights came on. Surprise! There were co-workers from the publishing house, old friends, Brent's sister, even their longtime gardener. In the center of the room, a huge cake with a golden number 20 on top. Melissa brought a hand to her mouth. "Our anniversary. I completely forgot." Brent smiled. "I know. But that's okay. I didn't." And then, among the guests, she spotted Brianna, young, elegant in a wine-colored dress, talking to Landon in the back. Melissa frowned. Brent noticed. "She helped organize everything," he said. "That's why we were together that day." "Okay, the drink wasn't a great idea, but we were behind on planning, and Brianna wouldn't let me drop the ball. I told her I wanted this night to be perfect." Melissa was stunned. That also explained the phone call to Landon. Of course, her son would help. He had been acting strange. Melissa blinked. The pieces started to fall into place. Brent held her hands. "I needed to remind you of what we have, of who we are. I love you, Melissa, and I don't want you to doubt that anymore." She smiled, emotional. "I think I owe you an apology. I was hurt, confused. And I didn't handle it right either. But let's do better. Together." Brent pulled her in, and they danced slowly, wrapped in soft music and scattered applause. Melissa rested her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in weeks, her heartbeat slowed. Maybe the us still made sense. And that night, she wanted to believe it.
So he wasn't cheating. It was all about planning the anniversary party? Wow. Melissa nearly ended her marriage over a lost earring and a smiley intern. This had every sign of going horribly wrong. But wait a second. There's more? Come. On, Steph. Don't leave me hanging. I'm back on the edge of my seat.
In the days following the party, Melissa felt like she was finally coming out of a long, emotional winter. Life wasn't exactly back to normal. Not completely, but there was a new lightness. Brent was more present, more attentive, more affectionate. It wasn't perfect, but it was care. And for now, that was enough. Despite their packed schedules, every 2 weeks they carved out time for themselves. Dinner, an old movie at home, a walk around Lady Bird Lake at sunset. Sometimes they even managed to make it weekly. One morning, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, Melissa smiled to herself and thought, maybe the worst is over. Landon and Chloe were now officially a couple. Melissa liked the girl, polite, mature, steady eyes. The kind of person you'd hope your son would choose. That night, Brent had said he'd be staying late at the office, a complicated case, demanding client, delicate documents to review. Melissa didn't question it. She gave him a quick kiss as he left and wished him good luck. Brent's office, 8:47 p.m. The soft glow from a corner lamp cast gentle shadows on the thick carpet. No papers on the desk. Brent's suit jacket was tossed on a chair, his tie on the floor near the door. On the couch, Brent and Brianna's bodies were tangled together, Naked, sweaty, out of breath, he was still breathing heavily. She lay, partially across his chest, dragging her nails lightly across his skin, teasing, not scratching. God, I love these complicated case meetings, Brianna whispered, playful, lips curled into a wicked smile. Especially when the problem's already solved, Brent replied, a smug laugh in his throat. I fixed your wife problem, didn't I? She said, pretending to be innocent. I threw her the perfect party, even got your son involved. I should ask for a bonus. Brent chuckled quietly. I'll consider it. Seriously, Brianna said, lifting her head, eyes glinting. Bringing Landon in? Brilliant, he has no idea. And your wife? She's more in love than ever. Brent ran a hand through her hair, lazily. She's amazing. I do love Melissa, a lot, I know, Brianna said without flinching. But with me, you ignite. He didn't deny it. He pulled her closer, urgency rising in his touch. Brianna traced a finger along his chest again and whispered, By the way, did your wife ever ask about the earrings again? Brent sighed, still relaxed. No. I think she either forgot or assumed they were yours from some innocent ride. Or maybe Landon's girlfriend. But next time, be more careful. Hey, it's not my fault you wanted to screw in the car, she said, pouting. Things fall, stuff gets lost. Brent smirked. Could have been worse. What if you'd left your panties? She laughed, sultry, and whispered near his ear, I wasn't wearing any, so that wasn't an option. He let out a low, satisfied laugh, his eyes glowing. You drive me crazy. That's why we did it in the car. I couldn't wait. It was fun though, right? She said, biting his lower lip playfully. They laughed together. No guilt, no shame, just pleasure. That's what I like. Risk, adrenaline. Wild sex, she added, giggling against his neck. Exactly, but no complications. Never. The last thing I want is love, she said, amused. Though I admit I lost a bit with this whole party thing. Now you've got to do date nights. Fewer nights like this. Brent pulled her in and kissed her deeply, then whispered, We'll adapt. There are still plenty of complicated cases coming our way. They laughed together, still entwined, like accomplices in a well-crafted crime. In the quiet of the office, the only sound was their breathing, and the unshakable certainty that Brent felt completely in control. Melissa trusted him again. Their relationship seemed great. Even the sex had improved. Landon suspected nothing. And Brianna? She was happy to keep playing with her hot daddy, as she loved to call him.
Hold up. So Brent was cheating this whole time, and he had the nerve to turn his lie into an anniversary gift? Unbelievable. They planned it all. Every move, every smile, every distraction. And you know what's worse? If Melissa doesn't stumble upon the truth, this could go on forever, but no one can keep up an act like that forever. At some point, another earring shows up, another clue. And when that happens, good luck, Brent. Because Melissa, she didn't deserve this. But then again, who? Ever said life was fair? This was another episode of Betrayal or Not. And this time, yeah, it was Betrayal. If you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters of this story full of secrets, twists, or perfectly disguised lies. Comments are probably turned off, just to avoid spoilers and keep the suspense alive for those still catching up. But don't worry, we're keeping a close eye on everything behind the scenes. Don't miss the next Betrayal or Not. See you next time.